Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Outgrow's Market of the Month. I'm your host, Dr. Saksham Sharda. I'm the creative director at outgrow.co. And for this month, we're going to interview TJ Macke, who is the SVP of Strategy at Sapper Consulting. Thanks for joining us, TJ.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So TJ, we're going to start with a rapid fire round just to break the ice. You get 3 passes. In case you don't want to answer the question, you can just say pass. But try to keep your answers to one word or one sentence only, okay?
Okay, do my best. Let's go.
At what age do you want to retire?
55.
How long does it take you to get ready in the mornings?
1 hour.
What item is worth spending more money on?
Books.
What movie do you enjoy quoting the most?
Pass.
Who's your favorite Disney character?
Aladdin.
Which movie comes to your mind when I say the word ambition?
Interstellar.
What are you most looking forward to?
Adventures with my family.
What is the one thing you wish you enjoyed more?
Being in the mountains.
What never fails to make you laugh?
Inside jokes with my friends.
Pick one, Mark Zuckerberg or Jack Dorsey.
Jack Dorsey.
The biggest mistake of your career?
Not being more candid with myself.
How do you relax?
Reading.
How many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
1.
A habit of yours that you hate?
Procrastination.
The last one is your favorite Netflix show.
Ooh. It's a difficult one. I'm totally blanking on Netflix shows. I'm all about Lord of the Rings right now.
Okay, so Amazon then. All right, so that was 8 and 10 I'm going to give you, which is a good start. So now we can move on to the long form questions.
Awesome.
The first one is, what in your opinion are the best ways to leverage the right kind of tech stack to make large enterprise account sales easier?
The best ways to leverage the right tech stack. So for large enterprise account-based sales, like the perspective that I try to help bring people back to is team selling. Like that's the core idea of account-based sales is your team selling. So any technology that's the right stage for your growth that can help you better collaborate on a sale, whether it's initial prospecting, managing an opportunity or, onboarding and ensuring client success. Like that should be the tenet, the thing that you come back to. How can I sell better as a team to this team of buyers at an account? I think where some folks get tripped up is that either they take on too much technology for their stage of growth, they're too small and they buy 18 tools that they could never manage, or they don't continue to invest in some of the peripheral solutions that add for a better account-based experience. So I don't know if that was too long, but that's my initial thoughts on that.
Oh no, you can answer these long. So we're not in the rapid fire round, and some speakers make the mistake of continuing to be in a rapid fire mindset like through the entire interview. But no, you can take your time.
Great.
But yeah. So why team selling in particular?
Because to me, that's what account-based selling is. Like you're selling to a team, right? There's a group of people on that account. Most of them you hopefully know, some of them you won't get to know, but you're not selling to an individual, you're selling to a team. And in order to provide a great experience, you've got to bring a team. So if you're an individual trying to run an account-based approach, you're going to be at a disadvantage because you can't bring the nuances to a conversation, to an experience that team is demanding. If a CFO asks for a follow-up meeting to a proposal and you've spent most of your time working with the CMO on a business plan, if it's the same person just at every single conversation without any additional support, the conversation lacks dimension because none of us can be a CMO and a CFO and a CTO in one. That's why we have those different leaders in our businesses. And so you've got to be able to match what the customer's bringing. I think that's maybe another thing I would add that, folks kind of get wrong is that they don't bring enough depth to match their buyer, right? Like our buying and selling journeys should be parallel to each other, and we should match the intensity and the participation that our buyers bring. So, if you've got 3 executives as part of an enterprise account-based sale involved on the buying side, how are we countering that on the selling side? It doesn't have to be one for one, but it definitely can't be one for all. So those are some of my thoughts.
And what do you think of gating content in general? Like, do you think it results in fewer potential customers understanding what you offer and what you offer and the issue you resolve for them?
Gating's like it's all about how you do it. So, um, you know, gating content comes back to this idea of like a mutual exchange of value. That's what we're doing. I'm going to give you something that you don't have to pay money for. And in return, you're going to give me some information about who you are and potentially how I could get in contact with you. Now, what's happened, what we've seen, is that exchange of value is often not equal. So we ask for lots of information in exchange for breadcrumbs of value. And inevitably, our buyers, people on our buying committee, feel jaded, frustrated. Sometimes you have the other way around, though. You've got you've got companies that are giving away incredible value in their content, and they ask for nothing or very little. It's not bad, but ideally, we should have a really mutual experience. And so I recommend that, for most companies, again, depends on your strategies, a lot of elements here, but you should have 2 or 3 core, really dense assets that are your pillars that you should feel confident gating because you're giving such immense value that you're asking really just for a little bit in return. And you should surround those pillars with lots of free open access content. And whether or not you're pulling from your pillars, that's a content strategy question. But you should lean on the side of giving more away, but you should feel comfortable and confident in your content to ask something in return. But if you don't feel confident, that's a sign you haven't invested enough in your content.
So do you have some examples of like good gated content and a company that does ungated content good?
Let me try to think of some examples. I want to be. I work with a lot of people in this space. I don't want to put anybody out. Let me initially speak like for ourselves, just because I can be most candid about that. So we put out a lot of content around how folks should think about their sales tech stack. That's a conversation we have a lot in sales workflows. And so we'll have a number of guides and articles that go out throughout the year that are, here's, some best practices on outbound prospecting. Here's the best, the 3 core pieces of technology for an inbound workflow. So those are examples of pieces of content we put out throughout the year that wouldn't be gated. But then inside of the year, we're typically producing like 2 core assets. And it's either like a universal sales workflow guide, or it's our perspective on what the best in class tech stack looks like. And it typically encompasses, 10 to 12 technologies, and it's our take on what those items are. Um, we spend a lot of time interviewing customers, interviewing the market, and really investing because our reputation's behind this. Um, uh, so we feel confident that we're providing value, and so we ask something in return. We ask for folks to, put some contact information in and let us know, why it's relevant. So that's an example for us. We're going to put out this year's here in like about 6 weeks, and folks will see. They'll have to, put in some information, but it's worth it because we think they're going to experience great value. There's many other companies that do this well. I'm trying to think. Figma has some great content, and I know some of the demand generation team over there. They're working really hard on providing that. Let's see, who else is another one? The team at Anaplan has a really complex product, and I feel like they do a great job providing the right depth through the journey. It's easy sometimes to throw lots of heavy content, especially with technical products. And I think they do a great job providing sort of a curated experience. I think that's underrated.
Okay. And what do you think of like unmeasurable? So gated content is definitely measurable, but what do you think of unmeasurable brand marketing activities such as LinkedIn and podcasting? Do you think they eventually lead to increased demand for your product?
They can. They can. I am a big believer in the value of the less tangible touches. Um, but I think it's uh, like you have to agree as a team or as an organization how you value those things. Um, it, and it's different for different like go-to-market motions. So some examples here. So I work for Sapper Consulting, and I was fortunate enough to be a really, really early team member. And when we were first building the company, we primarily grew through using our own methods, going outbound and prospecting. And we invested transparently very little in marketing. This was twofold. This was partially due to ignorance and partially due to strategy. We were very good at outbound, and so we felt confident in that. And we wrestled with this idea of how do we value, impressions on the websites or likes on LinkedIn or some of these less tangible brand experience items. There's lots of thoughtful marketers out there that are very confident to speaking to those things. But in the early days, we weren't confident in the value of that. And so we over indexed on what we could control. And it ended up working out. Sapper's had a great turn of events. But at some point, we realized that we were getting these like bonus wins. And we did some research into like how we were winning deals. And we saw that, on the surface, our inbound leads just were nice to have. Like, right, they were an unexpected surprise. Like, oh gosh, we got 20% more inbound leads. But as we started peeling back, we noticed that those eventually correlated, though we couldn't always make a direct connection, to those intangibles, right? So we won a best workplace award, or we had a group of people attend an event. We didn't get any, event leads, but we saw people eventually come through the funnel because they heard from a friend from a friend. And so we started to place more value as a team and an organization on those hard to place intangibles and investing in the brand, and not spending a ton of energy over quantifying the impact. We just said, we're going to do X number of these things, and we're just going to trust that it's going to be valuable. And it was. And that was the beginning of our real brand strategy that now, much smarter folks than me have taken over and do great work behind. So I think especially for, smaller organizations or folks just getting into content strategy and sort of brand experience marketing, you've got to sort of come to terms with it with yourself, especially if you're a very sales driven organization. You need to just sort of accept the reality there's going to be some things you have to invest in that it's very difficult to get the impact of the ROI. But here's the principle I'd back that up with. If you've ever like been to Las Vegas, or if you've ever played in maybe a poker championship, right? It's a certain amount of fun, and depending on your skill level, you're going to win something, hopefully. Uh, but you never bet more than you can lose. And I think that mindset or that principle should somehow be backing this intangible marketing. Because I've seen, especially young businesses, get sold on the idea of the intangibles, and they invest more money than they can stand to lose, or that they need to make back right away. And then they're in an over leveraged position, which is bad. So the thing that I would encourage folks is create some sort of practical budget, commit to a certain number of items, right? We're going to spend whatever, 10 grand this year. We're going to spend 100 grand this year on these types of experiences. We're going to do, 5 events, or we're going to invest in website, or we're going to, and those aren't good examples because they can still be tracked, but in whatever the thing is, we're going to invest in some, intangible marketing, and we're just going to watch it. We're going to commit to it for a year. We're going to do these things, and we're just going to see, do we get an increase in inbound that we can't correlate? What's the outcome of that? That's what I would encourage folks to do. But the trick is giving it time and space, but not over leveraging yourself. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that definitely works. But how does one go about as a small and medium business assigning a particular budget? What percent of the budget should be going into it, into intangibles?
I mean, that's, it's so customer to customer, company to company, right? I think, eh, like, one, what can you do you have to take from something? Can you afford to net increase your marketing budget? But I would like one step at a time. So if you've never invested in this before, see if you can go find $1,000 or $2,000 a month. And if you're a small company, that's like not no money, but it's not all of the money. And if you take $1,000 or $2,000 a month, that's 10 to 20 grand over the year, and you can participate in some meaningful experiences. So again, whether that's some sort of online engagement strategy, if it's offline events, if it's some sort of gifting strategy, I don't know. There's a number of things you can do. Publications, awards, find what those things are. And I think the deal is to just give it enough space. I see folks like they spend 2 months on a strategy, right? They spend $4,000. They're like, well, I didn't see anything come from it. So we got to give it the space if you want to actually measure that impact, especially the further you get away from the metrics.
Okay. So also, what do you think that in today's rapidly changing buying and selling dynamic, how critical is it to shift from sales enablement to revenue enablement?
I mean, candidly, it depends a bit on the business model. So, I'll be the first. There's a big trend right now between going from sales to revenue mindset, right? So we're not having chief sales officers, we're having chief revenue officers. We're having this idea of revenue as a complete journey. One, very valuable. And there's many organizations, especially in the SaaS world, where that is a more honest ownership of how money is made and cared for in the business, right? So, especially if we have got any sort of trial basis or product-led growth strategy, sales has to be closely related with the inbound and the marketing function. If we have an expansion pathway, right, or proof of concepts or anything where usage grows quickly over the initial period of journey, well, then we've got to have a great success function. Do we have an enterprise expansion model where we need account ownership to break into new business units or regions? Well, then we need a great account management function. And all of that has to be owned by one team that are coordinated. This comes back to the account-based conversation. If the buyer's bringing a team, we got to bring a team. If there's a true journey and not just moments in time, we have to bring a team, which means revenue mindset. And I guess to your question, revenue enablement. But I also want to call out that that's not every business. If you're not working in a subscription model, if you're not working in a rapid pace expansion model based on consumption and incremental success goals, then that may or may not be the right model for you. Especially if we look at the SMB market. If you're, a small, I don't know, any number of businesses. If you're providing professional services, if you sell copiers, if you're a managed IT provider, you may not have a business model that benefits from having a core revenue function that owns all, revenue pieces. But if you do, you're far better off investing in it. So I guess to answer your question, it depends. Depends on the business model and how you win your customer's business over time. And if it is, infrequent wins, so once a year or every couple years, and if it's not based on consumption, then no, I don't think revenue enablement and revenue operations is the model.
And what do you think has led to the majority thinking that revenue enablement is the model? Like, what has gotten people into that mindset in the first place?
One has been the rise of SaaS, the rise of software as a service, and this notion that we're not going to sell someone an upfront $2 million investment for 5 years for hardware or custom-built software like the old days, and instead we're going to incrementally win our customers' business over time, and we're going to break the payment structure over, a value-based increment based on usage or seats or feature sets. And software has continued to eat the world, like the famous quote. So because the customer access of value has changed, the monetization had to change. And because the monetization changed, we had to change what the internal supporting motion was. And so, I think that's given rise to this more mature perspective of, well, we can't have a salesperson sell once and then never talk to the customer again. That won't work for the business model. right? We can't have marketing only engage them up front when they're a lead and then never talk to them again, right? Because we want them to come back and experience value and expand and refer and all of that. I do think that even for non-software as a service businesses and non-software businesses, there are principles from that model that you're already seeing trickle into, the SMB world. This idea of sticking with your customers from a marketing perspective, right? Even after they're a customer, we still, most companies will still market to them. Here's some things you didn't know about us. Here's a newsletter. That wasn't always the case, or it was, sort of done on an individual level if you were a proactive business owner. We're seeing folks, ask for referrals, ask for customer satisfaction scores. These are things that consumption-based models pioneered and made standard. And now you're seeing, people that sell printers and copiers, or people that, do lawn mowing services, the bread and butter of the world, like how the world operates. They're learning these principles and the fact that they can make more money and win more customers, even though they're not, a revenue operations organization.
And speaking of changes, then AI, artificial intelligence, is the fastest growing area for sales teams.
Mm-hmm.
So, with adoption expected to increase almost 139% over the next 3 years. So, what are the most advantageous ways that AI is influencing today's sales technology, you think?
What are the most advantageous ways? I think some of the ways I am most excited about seeing AI show up right now comes actually back to like messaging, especially for um, SMBs, small companies, early companies that maybe can't afford to go and hire someone that has built out a sales program 3 times before. They can't afford the best in class sales representative that has their own book of messaging that they know works. Whatever it is, they're at a disadvantage to some degree. But we're seeing artificial intelligence show up in new parts of the buying journey. So in the marketing journey and inside of the sales journey. And there's a couple different tools out there that are either helping companies, write AI informed blogs or SEO content strategy. There's an amazing platform called Reggie that will help you write sales messaging and even like social selling LinkedIn posts, things like that. So there's a lot of AI innovation being done around an area that was almost exclusively a human endeavor, right? This sort of quasi scientific creative effort of how do I speak to my buyer? Well, now, AI is teaching us what the best ways are. And I think that's early in its journey, but that'll soon become the standard. You won't be able to compete unless you have some AI support in your go-to-market strategy.
And have you used that software, Reggie,
Yeah,
yourself
I
in
have.
the companies? Yeah.
Yeah.
And are you guys using that regularly, or was it something you were trying?
Yeah, so that's a platform that we
Mm.
use internally. But there's a number of others out there, that are either operating in similar related space or competing. So there's many solutions that you can look into. What are some other ones? Some other AI. For actual sellers, there's some really interesting AI call coaching solutions out there. I think that's also sort of at the forefront. It's early, but promising. If you're a sales rep that's new, there's tools that'll prompt battle cards or will, give you questions that you should think about or ask about. A lot of those solutions are really helping teams ramp faster and, increase the overall quota attainment of their sales team.
So there are like a lot of tools and stuff available now. So what are the most successful strategies for avoiding pitfalls when migrating legacy data to anything new?
Goodness, that's a whole ball of wax. Migrating legacy data is an incredibly hard thing to do. Um, Part of what's hard, I think, for companies is deciding what to move. If you're, and this can take a lot of different forms, but if you're moving from maybe one CRM to another, or this is your first time, investing in a CRM, you have all your customer data. I think one of the things that folks used to value a lot was like comprehensive data. I want all of the data on as much as I can get. And don't get me wrong, there's value. Data is the new oil, and having lots of data means you can do lots of interesting things. create interesting reporting, feed really powerful automation. But one of the things that I see holding some of the biggest companies in the world back is data integrity. And what they end up, what many companies end up spending a lot of time on is figuring out how do we improve the quality and accuracy of our data. So if I'm suddenly put in charge of an legacy data migration, one of the things that I want to talk about with the stakeholders involved is what data do we believe the most in? And what data is so questionable or so poor that we would never act on it? And if you can't improve that before the migration, you're better off leaving it out. Because there's many companies that like to talk about, oh, we could run this really thoughtful account-based automated marketing and sales motion, but you know what? Our native company name isn't reliable. We're at like 80% accuracy, so we can't use it. Get rid of it. If you can't use it, now there's some basic functions you're required to have, but companies should invest more, in my opinion, in data accuracy, and that should be one of the primary tenets anytime you're migrating data. What data do we believe in? What data don't we trust? Can we change it before we move? And if we can't change it, can we leave it behind and focus on net new and raising the bar of accuracy?
And so what exactly do you mean by leaving it behind?
I mean, quite literally not bringing it into your new system. Again,
Okay.
very controversial take, and there is some times where that's not an option, but too often the default is if we have it, bring it. And my challenge there to folks is that if you can't trust it, if you wouldn't go turn on an automation strategy leveraging that data, or you wouldn't create a report that you share with your team automatically before you fix it, is it worth bringing into your new system? Sometimes, again, you have to, but often it's not a requirement, especially if you're not going to use it. So don't bring it. Go and get new data that you can trust, or find a way to append that data so you can act on it. A lot of people are data hoarders, and I get it because data is incredibly valuable. You can do some interesting things. Historical data is very meaningful, but if you can't trust it, you're not going to act on it. It's going to sit in the basement, if you will.
I think humans are just hoarders by nature. Like if you're shifting flats, you get rid of so much useless stuff. I feel like there's an analogy there somewhere. But so going back from go ahead, you say?
I just said I agree. I think we're all hoarders. We got to be challenged.
So going back from data to intangibles once again, how crucial is it for companies to find a way to align their customer service practices with their brand's voice and business model?
How important is it to align your customer services practices with your brand voice? I think this is really important, but pretty hard to do. The best teams, again, this comes back to the account-based strategy, right? So if we're running a revenue motion where the journey's connected, and we're running an account-based motion where we have teams supporting teams, making sure that your success team knows what your voice sounds like can be difficult because a lot of those things are kind of intangible, right? So how do we tell someone, oh, we're sort of a fun, quirky voice as a brand that's really supportive and naturally curious? All right, well, if I'm a customer service representative and I get someone asking me my software's down, what do I do? I've ordered a lot of product, it's not coming. How do I show up in that conversation with a quirky, supportive, and curious language? It's hard. And so I think if companies want their customer support or customer service, customer success teams to leverage a brand voice, they have to invest heavily in enabling that. So the simplest way, right, is providing templates. So here's how you would answer this question or solve this problem or lead a curious inquiry with a customer with our voice. Many companies do that. They provide some sort of template or messaging. However, inevitably, templates fit 50% of the conversations your team might have. So what do they do for the rest of the time? Well, they have to improvise. And if they have not practiced how to improvise based on your messaging, or, and this is important, if they don't sort of interpersonally understand the messaging, if you've just dropped a content handbook to them and walked away and they don't get it on an internal level, they're going to have a hard time riffing and adding their own voice to that. which is why all of us have had awkward, clunky, not brand connected interactions. Literally everyone listening to this, I guarantee it, because so many companies struggle. So the things that I would recommend is like, yes, this is important. Again, match your level of capability with how much time you can spend on this. If you've got one customer service person, maybe you can't spend a lot on this, but spend a little. Make them some templates, and then practice asking them questions. I can't reemphasize role play and coaching enough. So set some time aside to prompt them and get them to respond. Give them some coaching based on how they respond, and then listen to or get a transcript of the interactions they're having with customers, and say, actually, like, I'd say it this way. Here's how we would handle that as a company, versus how you handle that. Like, it's a good try. Here's how I do it instead. Too many companies avoid this, or just trust that their team's going to get it intuitively. It's not intuitive. We have to help people understand how to speak in brand voice.
So could you relate all of this one more time to your take on the parallel of designing for both the buying and the selling journeys?
Yes, this is something that I talk about a lot and I think is really, really important. So companies tend to over-index on either the buying journey or the selling journey. If you spend much time on LinkedIn, you hear a lot of people talking about the buying journey. I had a terrible sales experience. An SDR cold called me and they didn't know my business name, or, I got a proposal from a company and they didn't get what I wanted. There's lots of woes, and we've been there. It's painful. It's frustrating when you go to buy and you don't have a thoughtful buying journey. So there's a lot of folks talking about the importance of make sure you design for your customer experience and not your own internal experience. The problem with that, the challenge with that, is that, well, your customer experience is fed, probably, unless you've got a totally direct-to-consumer motion, it's fed by a sales team. So that sales team, they have to do all of the things you're designing for your customer. And if you require them to do a lot of activity or to do really complex activities, and you don't give them the enablement or the space to succeed, it's going to fall apart. You could design the most perfect, beautiful, curated experience, and if it's too heavy and cumbersome, it won't work. The sales team can't execute it. So there's this parallel, and I think there's companies on the other side of the fence that are, the parallel is, over-engineering your buying journey. So these are the companies that all they think about is selling. All they think about is the sale. I got the sale. We won. We're done. We're out. Send the customer an invoice. We don't care. That's sort of the legacy sales team approach. Listen, I get it. I've worked with companies that have had that mindset before. You're just kind of going and trying to win as fast as you can. Sometimes as small companies, it's easy to default to that. The challenge is that typically, if that's your mindset, if you overemphasize the selling experience, then you design experiences that are painful for your customer. So you require your SDRs, your sales development reps, to cold outbound prospect to hundreds of accounts, and it makes their interactions very impersonal and demanding and greedy feeling. You require your salespeople to, create a certain number of opportunities or send a certain number of proposals. That's a lot, and it's very demanding and unrealistic. And so, again, they're impersonal. They're not thoughtful. They don't listen well. They haven't been trained or coached on how to be a thoughtful seller. All of these things contribute to over-indexing on the selling journey. The best companies meet in the middle. So they first draw out, probably on paper or on a lucid chart or something, what would the best buying journey look like if I was a customer? And then they map out below it, what would it actually take to support that? We got to send this email, and we got to, create this trigger and this automation. We got to have this type of tool. Literally map it out. This is why people pay consultants, but you don't have to have a consultant. You can do this yourself. Get some paper, draw it out, and then start running some volume through it. You're creating a little model. So what if we brought 100 new customers into the funnel? How many activities would that be for our seller? Oh my gosh, they'd have to do hundreds. That's not sustainable. Okay, well, let's redesign this experience. A lot of companies struggle to slow down enough to do this. So I'm calling that out. That can be challenging to invest the time. But for folks that do, they can be confident that the process that they're running balances giving the customer what they need to be successful and happy and fulfilled, and creating a process that's reasonable and realistic, and that you have the resources to support internally. That's that perfect union that, everybody here also has 1 or 2 sales experiences that's just perfect. You get a really thoughtful person that listens to your problems. They think about and consider what the best solution is. They don't try to overcharge you or oversell you. They're really gracious in helping you get started. Those companies, they had this great union between buying and selling. And so that's what I think more companies need to do, is find that balance.
And do you have any examples of companies that you've worked with that have become good at doing this?
What are some great companies that do a good job of this? I talked about them earlier. I think they're doing great things, and they had a great event recently. But Figma, Figma has a very product-led function, and I think that they do a good job of providing their customers early access, a thoughtful sort of journey of enablement, and for their B2B motion, they run a really again, thoughtful practice for bringing customers on board. And I think that's part of why, obviously Adobe wanted them and acquired them, and it's going to change their business model probably a little bit, but I think that they do a really great job of that. Some other companies that do great work in that arena. I'll get back to you on that. Keep going.
No, fair. Okay, so the last question is more of a personal kind. It is basically, what would you be doing if not this in your life right now?
Ooh, what would I be doing if not this? I love this. This is good. If I wasn't doing this, I'd be doing one of 2 things. I would either be starting a company to help folks adapt and try to mitigate the effects of climate change. It's something I see and I believe in the importance of quite a bit. Or I would be a climbing guide up in the Alaska range, up in either Canada or Alaska. I love mountaineering and hiking and climbing, and I would build my life around that if I could.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for joining us for this month's episode of Outgrow's Marketer of the Month. That was TJ Macke. Thanks for joining us, TJ.
Thanks so much for having me.
Check out their website for more details, and we'll see you once again next month with another Marketer of the Month.